have to turn this down. Not sure how. Okay. Real quick though, if I remember correctly, yes. I leveled up. After helping, finally finishing Pestilence. Oh, right, I'm just gonna turn that down. Sound
Pater
setting.
noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, veniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum super substantialem da nobis hodie, et dimite no...
That should be a little bit better. Also, I got a new companion. That's the whole reason why actually I came over here. I mean, it was also to finish the side quest for Pestilence, but also so that I could get my the Warhorse Hacienda. You're a good horse. Good horse. Okay. So, I've been playing a bit of, if you, of course, can tell probably from my quest log, playing a little bit of some Kingdom Come Deliverance. And for those, it's just an RPG, and it has this kind of, it feels a lot like Elder Scrolls, but then you're also throwing in, I'm going, wait, no, this is the right direction. You're throwing in some, I want to say Elder Scrolls because it has a very Oblivion look to it, but there's very really mechanically RPG-wise, the RPG-ness of it is very Elder Scrolls, but the gameplay is a little bit since with actual sort of medieval combat, and it's set in a very interesting time period. Here it is. Oh, good. In the 1400s, early 1400s, I think it's like 1407, 1403 or something like that, where we're in Bohemia, which is, that's the one I want. During the reign of Charles IV is dead, so his son, yeah, here we go, Wenceslaus IV is now king. And actual sort of real characters, including our man Jan Hus. Czech religious form is going to start a whole bunch of stuff. So we're yeah, I think we're about 1403 is where we are right now. Let's see here. Where's the guy that I'm looking for? I think it's no. I don't remember. But this guy's kidnapped currently, and we have to deal with this. And then there's a dude running around. Bunch of stuff. But, and the interesting thing about this time period, and especially where we are, there would have been tons of crossbows. It's kind of weird that it's not crossbows. They got like everything else. Like we have brigadines, which is what I'm currently totally would have happened, chainmail, all that other good stuff. Totally authentic. I mean, I'm not sure. Well, probably it's people should be using these helmets. And of course, I mean, longsword. This isn't really necessarily a longsword that I'm using here. If anything, this is probably more or less a bastard sword or some sort of cavalry sword, since it is. I mean, it is longer than the short sword. That's the other option for swords. Because you have short sword, hunting swords, and then like you have long swords. Um, let's see, is it listed in the under the skills? I mean, I know when we go here, long sword, and then and sabers and sabers, which sabers probably also should be longer than what they are in this game, but authentic, except for the fact that you're stuck with these village bows, which is kind of weird. And so, like, kind of looking at this, it's not so much. I think partially it's because that didn't go necessarily with the game where they wanted, which is also why like mounted combat isn't super big. I mean, you mounted combat and you can cheese things, and I just got abilities to make my mounted combat stuff better. And you'll see, I can cheese a lot of stuff with mounted combat. Though it's not necessarily really the best because there's no lances. There's no polearms in general, which is also kind of weird. It's really in personal combat. Knights, really during this time period, would have been using polearms. And you're not a knight. I'm a peasant. The main character is a peasant, but you fight alongside a lot of knights. You're working for a knight. Like they would have used polearms as their main weapon. And there are polearms. A lot of the NPCs do use polearms, but you yourself cannot get a polearm, and it's kind of weird. And I get it doesn't necessarily go. And there's the chance that if there's going to be any future DLC, I think they're actually going to be done. This game is rather old at this point. Even though I think it's only like 2 years. I think it came out in 17. No crossbows, even though that would have been the preferred weapon. And you see all these guards walking around and they have bows. And it wouldn't. They would have crossbows, most likely. I mean, not saying that bows and archers, but it's just pretty much continental Europe, everyone was using crossbows for the military. And the only one really using any kind of bows for war were the English. And by that, also the Welsh and the Scottish. I don't think the Irish really used longbows. I know there were Scottish longbowmen. And I want to say they were Flemish, people from Flanders, because I think there's a relationship. But I'm not entirely 100%. Oh shoot! And I forgot to eat food. Dang it. Which is something you have to do in this game. And so I kind of looked, and there's a lot of people who, of course, would not. Like, oh no, I don't want crossbows, because, then armor would be useless. Which isn't true. And that's the one of the things I really like about this game, is how sort of authentic it feels. Even though, granted, like, if you look at my, hold on, it's not my inventory. I carry this around. Because this is really useful. I get it for this right here, the stab damage. And I will show you more or less once I find the people I'm looking for how exactly, because I just, I gallop at them and I stab them on my horse. It allows me to quickly hit them and run, and stabbing is the most effective way to use the weapon on a horse in this game, because if I let them get close to where I can actually hit them, because this isn't really Mountain Blade, which mounted combat is like really big, and you have lances, and you can, crouch, strike people. I think I said crouch. I meant couch the lance, and you strike people with it, and also, or just using a spear, or of course, to stab someone, you can also just stab people from the back of the horse, or then slashing people from the horse. And also why you don't want to use a mace on the horse, because maces have ridiculously short reach. And I think there's warhammers, and I kind of want to get a warhammer, which I just spent all my money buying this horse. I need to save up my money again, which this will be a nice big chunk of money. Which this is also why I don't like, because okay, my archery sucks. Shit, they got dogs. See, that's what I hate. Hold on. I'm going to go ahead, because one of the reasons why archery really sucks in this game, the problem is I have to then switch to my sword, then switch back to the bow. And are they still following me? I don't think so. Okay. Thing is, I want to pull them up to see. I'm using the bow more or less to try and bait them up to this road. Oh! It's because I need to get off my horse. So that I can... See, this is why I hate the fact that these dogs... I don't have a dog. I never figured out... I mean... Never necessarily figured out... I just collected a tear. Oh, there we go. And see, this is where I want to... That dude's in armor. Guess what armor is not affected by Blood Force?
Get him! Ha! Ну gyere, te! Sha!
See, this is why I hate the mace. Well, I don't hate the mace, but it's the fact that it has such a short reach that I can't, when I do that, I can't really follow up. I think this is the captain. This is the guy I'm supposed to kill. Come on.
Igen! Ez betalált! Pina! Bátok!
The whole thing I pushed...
Mi van? Csak nem fájt? Itt fogsz nekem pityeregni?
Pretty sure they're speaking Hungarian at me.
Rossz helyen vagy, rossz időben.
Oh crap, and I'm pretty sure I just... This is gonna get very bad for me real quick. I can only really... Which is part of the...
Get it! A picsába.
that's the cap. Oh, shit.
Az isteni!
No, I'm bleeding. God dang it. This is definitely going to... Really, how is he able to recover that quickly? And I'm dead. Ah, shit. See, and it's very hard to actually fight more than one person. Because a lot of times you can't get the controls to... It's not something you can't get the controls to do what you want. So that I'm trying to do something, which actually, so like I have a few combo moves, but to get them actually to land takes like this really perfect timing, and then since you're fighting AI, in a lot of ways, it's a lot easier for them to do perfect things than for you. Right? So back to the whole thing about crossbows, and I think hopefully now that maybe you've seen some combat, even though it didn't necessarily work for me, is that how effective my armor really is, and how little damage they were necessarily able to do because of their swords. The captain was able to do a little bit better simply because I got really lucky with that arrow strike. Dang it, I have to do all of that over again. Is that he had an axe. And an axe is way more effective against armor than it is... Oh, and I forgot to spend my points. And same thing with the mace. It's more effective against armor than a sword is, because the sword allows for, which, you know, I should probably just open up, because here's stabbing and here's slashing damage, and as you can see, these values are much higher. Of course, my body armor, thanks to the Gambizan, I think is giving most of that body armor for against blunt. But I'm well protected against slashing and even stabbing damage. Okay, and in reality, and so we talk about how, oh well, the crossbow is so much better at, you know, piercing armor, blah blah blah, and a lot of people don't understand that. One, there's multiple types of crossbows. And so your most basic, like the war crossbow that comes about, that becomes very popular, is, and a lot of people for some reason think the crossbow suddenly has like that's the magic ability of the crossbow, is that it's able to do all this stuff. Not realizing that how powerful a longbow really is, because I think longbows have about, I think it's like 75 to about around 140 pounds of pressure, which is a lot, and that's like the 140 is your, like the kind that they're really using. The 75 is like, here, you're new to longbows. Here's your longbow that you're gonna start training on and building up to, like, kinds of stuff. Because it's like, oh, you weigh 75 pounds. Here's a 75-pound bow. It's sort of kind of, and again, I'm simplifying and generalizing, and that's probably not necessarily 100% true, but like, and a lot of people don't understand that there's two ways that ranged weapons are used. You have the indirect, which is where you shoot a volley of, of arrows up into the air, and really a crossbow and a longbow are just as effective as that, except for we talking about the advantage of the longbow. The advantage of the longbow is that it can shoot a lot faster, because its rate of fire is depending upon how fast you can notch an arrow and then draw the bow. Right? Crossbow, of course, generally takes a little bit longer, because there's a little, like, because you have to span the bow first, and then you have to put an arrow. Whereas the arrow, notching an arrow and then drawing the bow, is sort of part of the same motion. I think you kind of understand what I'm saying. But so the longbow, and also the range. The longbow has better range because the longbow has a much larger power stroke. What we're talking about, typically the span of the bow, I think they usually run 30, 32 inches, because that's like, which is the draw distance. And that's totally dependent upon how big of a person you are. Obviously, the bigger dudes, bigger draw, more power, longer arrows, can go farther. Crossbows, not so much. Much shorter power stroke. So while they might have a lot of the same power behind them, which is, again, the advantage. You can take like this big, huge longbow and get the same amount of power out of a much smaller crossbow. Easier to carry, which is one of the reasons I would also prefer to have a crossbow right now, because they're a lot of knights. A lot of people like don't understand like knights would carry crossbows because they're super easy to use on horseback, and that's just your regular crossbow, and we can call those either crossbows or even the light crossbows or like the hunting crossbows where you have a wooden bow. So they're all wood construction, and like a really good one that's maybe it's some kind of composite, would give you the power of a longbow, and that you would use, these kind of war crossbows, which would be used, for fighting in, wars, right? And they would be just as effective as piercing armor as a longbow in direct fire. Which is another thing. Like a longbow is perfectly capable of piercing armor in direct fire, just like a crossbow. However, that is in the context where we talk about longbows and crossbows piercing armor a whole bunch, is in the earlier part of the medieval period. When we talk about the Battle of Agincourt, where and a few other battles where English longbow just slaughtered French knights, and not realizing that a lot of those French knights were in iron armor. And while they weren't necessarily steel arrows they were using, because steel is expensive, and like the arrows I'm carrying on this guy, I mean, they're not. The arrows that I am carrying on this dude, which I need to look at my inventory anyway, aren't. I mean, they're cheap compared to a lot of other stuff, but so would also have been made of iron, and an iron arrowhead is not going to pierce steel. Steel arrows will probably pierce iron armor, but so of course there's this process where you can actually steel an arrow, where you take iron arrows and you bake them in probably charcoal or something with carbon. So the carbon is then baked into, and it creates this thin layer of steel around the arrow tip, making it much stronger. It hardens, and basically, I mean, it's still an iron arrow. It just has this coat of steel over the iron. As one of those things, we think they did it, but it's my understanding that we don't know if they actually did it. There's references to it, but obviously no examples exist, because even though it's a steel arrow, it's not stainless steel, and it would rust away, which is the big problem of things made of iron, which steel is made of iron. But within this, which is why I was probably, why I take that stamina damage, why my stamina bar drops, because you getting hit, it still hurts, right? But this armor that I am wearing would be perfectly capable of defeating most arrows. I mean, obviously, probably not this piercing arrow, which is probably designed like the it's like a square peg. I want to say kind of like a square pyramid, and so it hits the armor and then it splits it. Other than the fact that my chainmail would so it's probably actually maybe a thinner one. I don't know. Would stop that. But my armor that I'm wearing right here would defeat arrows, even steel arrows, because this is steel armor. At least I'm afraid I'm hoping it's steel armor. Would defeat arrows. And then so when we're really talking about crossbows that can pierce armor, we're talking about the heavy crossbows that are using metal. It's a metal prow. So the bow part is actually completely made of metal, which allows you to get huge, huge, huge amounts of power. Almost 1,000 pounds. So we're saying like 140 pounds for a longbow, and now we're talking about a 1,000-pound crossbow. So, but the thing is, you need a windlass or a I can't remember what the other device is, but the windlass, of course, is the big one that everyone's familiar with. The ropes, you're actually winding it up, and like that's like the French arbalist, even though like arbalist is one of those terms that when we're saying arbalist, we're referring to a heavy crossbow, and like at very, very close distances, there's a chance it's gonna, like, with a steel bolt designed to defeat armor, it's might make a hole. But you also, a lot of people don't understand it, which, or again, I have my, which I'm not actually wearing plate, I'm wearing a brigandine, which a brigandine, it's a lot of people would confuse this to be studded leather, so this is a leather jacket, and inside the leather jacket are these steel bands, or plates. So think, it's kind of like modern Kevlar, in a lot of ways. So the leather does offer me some protection, but the real protection comes from the fact that there are plates attached to the leather, and that's what these little metallic studs are, is actually where the plates are attached, which is much better than earlier splint, because the splint, more or less, where they were kind of sewn in. This is a much sturdier, and this is a lot more advanced armor, and of better quality, which is good enough for defeating swords and stuff like that. It would probably stop an arrow, but you're also forgetting the fact that underneath that, and the whole reason when you wear this, of course, reason why people would choose to wear brigandine, and a lot of knights chose to wear brigandine, is because, one, it's not so much that they're necessarily cheaper than plate, but they offer more flexibility than plate. They're a lot more maneuverable than plate, and they're easier to wear than plate. I mean, this is definitely, like, if you're in an adventurer sort of situation, you would probably go with the brigandine. And then, of course, under that, I have my chain. So, like, stuff that would defeat chain will not defeat plate, and stuff that would defeat plate will not defeat chain. So by layering them, I'm giving myself much better protection. And then underneath all of that, I of course have a gambizin, which is padded armor, which then helps me with the blunt damage, because it's padded. Granted, not much. Gambizin, of course, by itself is able to defeat cuts. You'd have to have really, really sharp blades, and the problem is if you have a really, really sharp blade to defeat Gambizin, I have my brigandine on top of that, and the sharp blade is just not, I'm going to probably break your sword. I mean, not really, but having a sharp blade against plate is not really going to be advantageous. And so, really, archery in this game is just kind of silly, because it would still hurt. I don't know if you've ever been shot by an arrow or anything. It would still hurt. It would still do damage. You're going to have bruises. It's going to stop somebody. And obviously, like, in that scene earlier where I actually landed an arrow on a dude's head and it knocked him out, because, I mean, that's what would happen, right? I mean, you got hit in the face with an arrow, even though it didn't kill him because I hit his helmet. It still knocked him out. Oh, there's the camp I'm looking for. So it's also, I'm kind of reaching the end of this whole video. And so I'm not really understanding why, because like I said, I would rather have a crossbow right now. It'd be much easier and simpler for me to use. This is weird. I don't remember this. Oh, wait. Oh, because I'm in a different bend. I'm actually on the other, behind the camp now. And easier for me to use on horseback. Granted, I wouldn't have the fire rate of a bow, because it's one of those things where I have to... So I would have to span the crossbow, which I'd be able to do on a horse. Did he just say... Never mind.
kereseli? Véletlenül kibújtál anyád szoknyája alól?
And then I'm gonna run away. I am far more mobile than you, dude. And then I'm going to draw my sword. And see, now we get to see some mounted combat. And I'm totally aimed the wrong way. Okay.
Yeah.
Run fast, run fast, run fast. Turn around.
Yeah.
And that's a hit, but it's going to take a couple hits. I've had a few where I've hit them in the back, and it kind of insta-downs them. But thanks to my height advantage, ooh, did I actually kill? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, he bled out. My height advantage, my speed, and all that good stuff. Make sure I don't want to be interrupted. Like last time, that was bad. And this is not the captain. I'm able to do a lot more damage. Poor Cumin. Don't worry, he's a very bad guy. It's okay that I killed him. But I could easily span a bow, and I think there are specific saddles to where the knight could. I mean, you could span it on your stomach, and that's another especially if I'm wearing armor and I'm padded. It's not like directly on my stomach. I could rest the crossbow on the stomach and then span it, and if need to, I think there would have been saddles where simply I could place the crossbow in the saddle, and then if I need to use both hands to span it, which I probably would be for a decent powered crossbow, obviously a very light crossbow where I can span it with one hand, or I would need some sort of spanning device to get the really good ones where, you know, I need which is why, like, I think there are people who might have been offended by the crossbow, which is weird in Skyrim, how that one actually functioned. But that wouldn't. It makes sense to me that the dwarves would have. See, I didn't really do anything to him. This is not a very powerful bow. Crossbow, it probably would have made him flinch. Ooh, he's chasing me pretty hard. Shit.
Yeah.
That a particularly powerful, like, totally makes sense. That loading mechanism makes sense to me, and especially since we're talking about. Oh, that was the camp leader. Ooh, nice. See, now my options are I can either go back into the camp, find some. Oh, got a mercy kill him. Some of the other things. I am not, you know, go to chivalry. Show some mercy. That's worth a lot of money. Die abilities. 24, 24, 10. That actually might be better than mine. Silver spurs, also worth money. Need to go to a horse person so I can get some better horse stuff. Let's actually look. 2028. And what was the other? No, I don't know why I'm going. 24, 24, 10. This is much better than mine. What is the current condition? Do I have? I think this is for. That's for weapons. Sidekick. Let's get out my armorer's kit. Move to inventory. I don't need both of them. Inventory. Apply. Oh, I don't have enough high enough skill to fix that. Dang. Oh well. Move to horse. Move to horse. What else did I pick up? There's my fancy shirt. You know what? Oh, the silver spurs. See there. Human X. Don't care. Of course, my options are I can kill the other dudes in the camp so I can get their ears, or just turn this stuff in. I mean, the camp's destroyed. Probably shouldn't risk it.
Yeah.
But some kind of spanning device that could be used to easily span the crossbow from saddle. I mean, crossbows, a lot of knights carry crossbows because they did have they're much easier and simpler to use. They don't require, which again, talk about the advantage of a crossbow. What's the advantage of the crossbow? Well, one, there's no strength requirement to it. Two, you only need training in how to aim it, not necessarily how necessarily to use it. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that longbow takes a large amount of intensive training, both because of the strength and actually how to properly use it. Crossbow, not so much, because I'm not going to say it's point and click, but that's another thing is the fact that it's kind of point and click. There's a lot of intensity, and that the fact that it can hold tension and you can have it loaded and ready to use. It's a big advantage. It's also smaller. It's not necessarily cheaper. And the problem is, and a lot of people go, oh, like, people complain about the crossbow because, like, of how it can just easily kill knights, blah, blah, blah. And it's nothing so much to do with that as much as the fact that peasants were it was so much easier for a peasant, because you have to remember longbowmen are still part of the, like, a lot of them are yeomen. They're part of the landed gentry. And like a nobleman killing another nobleman is not a big deal. But when suddenly, like, peasants, it's super easy for a peasant to kill a knight. That's kind of a big deal. But knights were using them too. Were using the crossbow too. Like I said, they're super easy to use on horseback. Mounted crossbowmen, like, were a thing.
How are you?
How am I?
I've taken care of that.
Have you brought...
Here it is.
Well, that is a... Now it seems
Loads
we
of
took a bit
money.
of a breather. There's no sign of any human...
Thank you, Captain.
But it would be a pity to waste your talents. Or around Skalitz. God preserve...
Well, I'll be glad to deal.
I don't doubt it. But he's the custodian at the Sasso Monastery. And in charge of security and...
Very well, Captain.
Ooh. Well, I have some other quests to do before.
I have some trophy.
Show me. They deserved it, the butt.
See, we don't like humans here. Not a whole lot of money. How much money do I have now? I'll have to sell some of my stuff. I need to go to a blacksmith and sell a lot of the other stuff. Get some repairs. My fancy new armor. I probably should look for some better chainmail and probably better buddy. I should probably just move to actual plate. But it's also super expensive. And I really don't have that kind of money. Especially when I need... I would like to get a warhammer. I might be able to afford one. But I believe first I need to check to make sure I'm not going to run out of nourished food. Oh, it's the smoked sausage. Let's eat the smoked sausage. There we go. Okay. And go back to... Let's see here. I need to go... I'm trying to remember if it's faster to go... No, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be dark by the time I get there, so I'll just go sleep. Then I can save. And hopefully I don't get ambushed on the way there, because that's going to be really annoying. But now that I have this warhorse, it shouldn't get spooked so easily. And throw me, which is the annoying thing. I mean, if it throws me, and I'm, like, if there's 4 humans, and I'm fighting the 4 humans, and 2 of them have bows, that's a fight I can actually probably win. Handling 2 normal, regular, not captain humans is actually fairly easy. They're not a pilgrim. I'm pretty sure that's actually important, but not right now because I'm going to save. And so how I think crossbows could work in this game is obviously, like I said, you could have 3 classes where you have the light crossbow, which is probably one that you can just span with one hand. That also maybe like would go up to where you have the hunting crossbow, which crossbows for hunting. Totally a thing. I need to get my torch out so I don't get fined. And then you could have the war bow or war crossbow, which are the heavier ones where you actually probably have a stirrup or might need some light spanning. And I'm still saying these are not the middle. And then the heavy crossbows, which would be the ones with the metal bows that need the various other things to, you know, get the power. And then against plate armor, though, they really wouldn't be that effective. I don't think people understand there's a reason why people stopped using shields, because they didn't need to anymore. I mean, steel plate armor is... Oh, shoot. I hit the wrong button. I meant to hit D to increase the time, and I hit E instead, and it... Well, anyway. Steel plate armor eventually makes you impervious to everything but, you know, a dude with a warhammer. Which, one of the 2 problems I do have, and again, some of the things, like there's certain limitations the developers have, like the fact that you can't necessarily really change your stance, which I'm going to go see right now if I can buy a warhammer, if I have enough money, which I might if I'm also selling all those goodies I just got. Of course, that also depends. Is the swordsmith open today? Or at this time? Because some of the times are like kind of weird. Which, if they're weird, I mean, I do have a book I need to read. Yep, he's not open. So you know what? I'll sit right here. And I'm pretty sure... Did I finish this book? No, I'll find out here in a second. I think I did. I believe this has to do with repair. And I'll just read this for like 5 hours. Increase my reading skill. Here's oh, hey! Because a warhammer... There's a reason why Mace's warhammers became very popular, and why a lot of them are probably my second choice after a polearm.
Your neighbor.
Yay! I increased the level of maintenance. What's this? Your tire you have on will suffer 15% less wear and tear. You know what? I think that's more important than... But I didn't get a point in reading. I mean, I leveled in reading. I just... Next level.
With salt, caraway seeds, garlic, and more. You'll find it nowhere else.
What? What? It's noon.
God save you. Take care.
Gosh darn it. It's noon. How are they not open?
Bread baked just this morning. Bread.
Carrots that'll make you and your family happy.
I'm gonna head to dinner. I think I've said enough about crossbows.